So, if you're going through the dark night of the soul and you find yourself struggling, I just wanted to share some of the reasons why this phase in your life can be really painful. When I was going through my own dark night of the soul stage, it was really challenging because I didn't know why I was feeling the way I did, and I had a really difficult and challenging time with it. And so, hopefully, by understanding, why this happens, why it's so painful, hopefully it'll give you some peace of mind and find some acceptance to how to handle this period. And I'd also say too that you wouldn't be put in this position if you weren't strong enough to handle it. So just kind of remember that as well, that these challenges that come up in your life are there to kind of help you grow in some way, shape, or form. And so even though it seems really hard and really painful, just know that you do have the strength to go on with this. So there's often a deep grief that occurs that's kind of hard to explain. I mean, if you think about it, the dark night of the soul is the transition period of letting go of your old life, of your old self. And with these changes, it's understandable that a grieving process needs to occur. And one of the things that can occur is breaking down of relationships. I remember when I started my awakening journey, one of the first things I had to let go of was my core group of best friends. I basically had my best friends since elementary and high school, and there was 4 of us, and it was the type of friendship that I thought that we would be there, for each other through all our life transitions of starting our careers, getting married, starting a family. But that did not happen at all. We basically just, for whatever reason, we just ended up growing apart. And so at the time, because I was still so new to all the changes that I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know I was going through an awakening, period, and going through a dark night as well, that I basically denied it to myself and repressed a lot of the grief that I had around it. Eventually, though, I did have to grieve it, so that came a little later. And a lot of times too, during the dark night of the soul, you'll probably be questioning a lot of things and contemplating on a lot of things and having realizations. And one of the realizations I had when I was going through this process, going through my dark night of the soul, was just realizing how sad and unhappy my childhood was, because I grew up with an emotionally neglectful mom, and so I had to grieve my childhood. Basically, I also had to grieve the mother that I needed but never had. Even though she is still alive, I had to grieve, the idea of what I needed as a child and the type of mom I needed. And so I had to grieve all that as well. And I think another thing a lot of us will grieve too is grieving the expectations we had for ourselves, whether it's goals, aspirations, whatever. Because I remember when I was in my late teens, early 20s, I was so adamant about getting my life together, becoming an adult, trying to figure out my career and finding purpose. For whatever reason, I just, for the longest time, always was so I needed to find my purpose. What's my purpose? And just really wanted to figure that out at a younger age. But when I basically got to my mid-20s, life had other plans for me. I basically got into one of my most challenging and longest dark nights of the soul, which lasted over 10 years. And so, that time frame of being in my 20s and 30s, that was basically taken up by my dark night of the soul. And so I had to grieve and let go of all my expectations, all these hopes and dreams that I had for myself that I was going to figure out in my 20s and 30s, but never did because of that whole experience. And so I had to basically let go of all those attachments to that. And so I think a big part of, the pain that occurs comes from the fact that this is also called an ego death, right? So you're taking away a layer of the ego of the pain body. And there is a lot of, stored negative emotions that were never processed. There's a lot of repressed and suppressed grief that was never dealt with, right? And so when that happens, it can be really painful. It can be a watershed moment of just all this negative pain coming up. So during the dark night of the soul that lasted over 10 years for me, I basically went through a deep depression for the last 4 years of it. It was the most painful experience that I had ever been through, and at times I definitely really questioned whether or not, I wanted to be here still. And it came to the point that I was not really functional. Day-to-day duties, day-to-day responsibilities were like really hard to do. I could barely function. And so there were just deep states of depression, lots of crying, lots of pain. And, a lot of the times I didn't know why. I didn't understand what was going on, all that stuff. But it definitely was the point that I was contemplating, not being here anymore. And it was so serious that it got to a point that I even scared myself, because I really didn't trust myself at that time during that period. So eventually I came to realize that it was actually my ego's last attempt to hold on, to basically have the last word and to be in control. And so luckily I didn't listen to the voice in my head and was able to make it through. But not every dark night of the soul, has a deep state of depression that comes with it. Although there are a lot of people that go through that as well, but there are also a lot of people that don't go through depression. So, yeah. But if you do experience that, if you do find yourself getting into that, just be aware that the ego may try to do that as well to you. That it may try to tempt you into not going through this process anymore, and that the best option is to not be here. But don't listen to that voice, and just know that it is a spiritual, emotional, and, mental kind of death, I guess you could say, more of a death of the ego. And so going through a dark night of the soul can be a really challenging, painful experience with a lot of grief, a lot of sadness, and it can just feel like an internally chaotic time in your life. But just know that as hard as it may seem, it's completely normal, and it's totally, natural to kind of go through this process of change in that kind of way. But hopefully by understanding, why it happens and what's going on inside of you, that it can give you some peace of mind to, dealing with this process, and to help you find some sort of level of acceptance that, this is just the way it's got to go, and you just got to keep going through it, keep processing everything, process the emotions, process the deep states of grief that you may experience. And hopefully, you can somehow find peace in the pain, to be able to kind of navigate in that kind of way. And just know that when you get to the other side of it, it'll totally change you. You'll be a completely different person, and you'll be so glad that you went through it, because it'll give you so much freedom when you're able to kind of reach to the other side. So I guess that's everything for today. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.